Look, I didn't overpromise, but I have probably outperformed what anybody thought would happen. Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does.
Sometimes, perhaps it could be seen as dangerous.
I have no idea.
We're talking about the Biden press conference today and not much else. There's a lot to cover. We have a lot of clips coming up on this episode of Daily Caller Live. My name is Jobob. Daily Caller Live starts right now.
3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
That might be the only brown guy on earth named Jobob.
That is actually their name, Jobob.
From a nice hotel room in downtown Phoenix, Arizona, where I'm doing the TPUSA live stuff this week. Good to see you this morning. Wish it was better for the President of the United States. I actually do think that. I wish he was better mental condition. We got a lot of clips coming up from the Biden press conference yesterday. His first solo press conference of this year, second overall since his entire time in office. And he said some interesting things that I want to play for us, and then we're kind of going to go through some of the highlights today. So without further ado, this was the first question that got asked. He came out, gave his whatever your rabble-raising speech, and I don't care when any politician does that. Just so you know, if Republican, Democrat, whatever it is that they are, and they come out there and say whatever it is that they want to say, I don't actually care, because we know they're going to spin things, well, the way they're going to spin things. I care about the media's questions, and it was interesting to see what kind of questions the media, the super left-wing media that was in the room, asked, who he called on, how he answered them. The first question started off with this, and it kind of gave a pretty broad overview of the entire year, because this is the one-year anniversary of Joe Biden taking office, gave a broad scope of what the year looked like, and asked the president this question. Here's what he said.
I know some of my colleagues will get into some specific issues, but I wanted to zoom out on your first year in office. Inflation is up. Your signature domestic legislation is stalled in Congress. In a few hours from now, the Senate, an effort in the Senate to deal with voting rights and voting reform legislation is going to fail. COVID-19 is still taking the lives of 1,500 Americans every day. And the nation's divisions are just as raw as they were a year ago. Did you overpromise to the American public what you could achieve in your first year in office? And how do you plan to course correct going forward?
Why are you such an optimist? Look, I didn't overpromise, but I have probably outperformed what anybody thought would happen.
Technically, maybe that's true. He did. In terms of outperform, I don't necessarily, if you're not taking it as generally a good thing, I think he far exceeded expectations of how bad it actually could be. But that's just me. That's one man's personal opinion. I don't know. What do you think? Let me know in the comment section if you think Joe Biden outperformed the expectations, because the expectation was pretty dang bad. I thought it was going to be bad. I didn't know it was going to be this bad. But like that reporter said, again, this is the first question of the press conference. He said that, here's all of the things that you said you were going to do. Do you think you overpromised? Not only did Joe Biden say no, he said, not only did I not overpromise, I think I outperformed. The polling numbers would not show that to be true. Remember, Joe Biden is polling among the lowest anybody has ever polled when it comes to presidents being polled on their approval rating. And it's not going up from there. I wanted to get to this question. This was actually interesting. I'm not a fan of, I'm not a fan. I don't like making fun of the president's cognitive decline. I do it sometimes because it is funny, but it doesn't give me as much pleasure as making fun of the policies. What I see Joe Biden to be is an older man losing his cognitive ability. And in a lot of ways, I think a lot of us think that is unfortunate and mostly sad. Having said that, he is the president of the United States, commander-in-chief of the greatest military in the world, and probably that should not be a thing for that type of office. If you have any sort of cognitive disabilities, including cognitive decline in older age, while it is incredibly sad, it is a threat to the American people. Now, he did call on someone from Newsmax who asked him a question along those lines. Take a listen to this question and listen to how the president answered it.
Thank you very much for this honor. James Rosen with Newsmax. I'd like to raise a delicate subject, but with utmost respect for your life accomplishments and the high office you hold. A poll released this morning by Politico Morning Consult found 49% of registered voters disagreeing with the statement, Joe Biden is mentally fit. Not even a majority of Democrats who responded strongly affirmed that statement.
Well, I'll let you all make the judgment whether they're correct.
Well, so the question I have for you, sir, if you'd let me finish, is why do you suppose such large segments of the American electorate have come to harbor such profound concerns about your cognitive fitness? Thank you.
I have no idea.
So that was it. That was the entire question. He said, I have no idea, and then just moved on. Again, I did appreciate the way that reporter asked the question. It was respectful, but also hit on a point that we're all trying to figure out. Is he aware that we all think that? We don't really know. So I appreciated the question. And then to kind of get into the cognitive decline a little bit further, we've got a clip from another question the reporter was asking. I'm not entirely sure if we have the reporter asking the question, but he was asking about schools. And do you think this could be a catalyst for Republicans to take back the House in the midterms and maybe even the Senate? And then Joe Biden gave a weird, rambly, lost his place a couple times answer. Now, just so you know, this clip is cut. I cut a big section of it out. That's not to take anything out of context. I just want to highlight the inability for the president to keep the train rolling mentally, so to speak, when he's answering this question. Also, if you haven't already, click the like button that's down right below here, and then click the little share button over here. It really helps us out, gets us to more people, helps us continue doing what we're doing every single day on Daily Caller Live. Really appreciate you staying tuned, clicking the like button, clicking the share button. Anyways, listen to this clip. Again, I don't take a lot of pleasure in playing this sort of stuff, but given the fact that he's got the highest office in the land, I feel like it is necessary. Watch this.
Well, could school reopenings or closures become a potent midterm issue for Republicans to win back the suburbs?
Oh, I think it could be, but I hope in God that look, maybe I'm kidding myself, but as time goes on, the voter who is just trying to figure out, as I said, how to take care of their family, put 3 squares on the table, stay safe, be able to pay their mortgage or their rent, etc., is becoming much more informed on the motives of some of the political players and some of the political parties. The American public are trying to sift their way through what's real and what's fake. And I don't think I've never seen a time when the political coverage, the choice of what political.
Okay, so like we're saying, this really isn't like a hey, let's poke fun at a cognitively degenerating old man. Again, I don't like playing that stuff, but it I think is necessary. And honestly, I kind of worry about national security when it comes to this sort of stuff. But that is the president talking yesterday. Pretty lost his place a lot of times. Was seen as a pretty old guy. Look, If I had one piece of advice to the Biden administration, and look, I'm looking at this from a political standpoint only. Maybe you disagree. He's been getting a lot of heat for not doing press conferences. That has been clear even before he was a president. He was on the campaign. He wasn't doing any press conferences. He wouldn't meet with the press. He wouldn't take live questions. He doesn't speak extemporaneously very well. So that's been a problem constantly. The political damage that he takes for not doing press conferences is less than the political damage that he takes for doing press conferences. In other words, don't do any more press conferences if you're the president of the United States. Are you going to get hit for it from the other side and even from your own side for not talking to the press? Yes, but it does more political damage to him to actually get up there in front of the microphone and take questions than being questioned about not taking questions, if that makes sense. From a political standpoint, that's what I think. I don't think he does himself any favors. Take the heat for not doing press conferences and don't do them, because the backlash for actually doing a press conference for the president is so much worse. We got some of this clipped out from one of the things that I think is the most important thing that he said. Look, we've all talked about, you've seen on the internet, you've seen on Twitter, you've seen on Fox News, you've seen pretty much everywhere, all of the more cognitive declining moments, the parts where he's been confused. And that is what it is. But I think there was actually a very important component to this press conference that could have global implications. And this is not talk show host being exaggerating and all that sort of stuff. No, this is something that could actually be a huge problem with that the president said yesterday, and people are commenting about it and not being charitable for it. But before I tell you about that, I got to tell you about this. You need to protect your gold. As we've seen from the press conference, the first guy that asked a question was like, inflation is through the roof. Prices are going up everywhere. What are you going to do to stop that? And you can see Joe Biden didn't have a great question. He thought he was outperforming expectations. So what does that mean? Inflation is only going to go up further. How do you protect yourself? Because when inflation goes up, it's effectively a hidden tax that the government, or at least the monetary system, is placing on your savings. In other words, you need to protect your savings. The best way to do that is through precious metals. You might be thinking, well, I don't know anything about investing in precious metals. Do I get a dump truck and back up a bunch of gold into my backyard and bury it? You can, and Birch Gold can help you do that. That's actually totally fine. But more likely, you have an IRA or a 401k that maybe you'd like to transfer into a gold-backed IRA to hold its value. You can learn all about how you do that by texting JOBOB to 989898, and our friends at Birch Gold will send you a fully blown, no risk, no obligation, everything you need to know pamphlet on how you can protect your savings from inflation. So do it today. Text JOBOB to 989898. Birch Gold, A+ rating at the Better Business Bureau, fantastic company to work with. They'll send you everything you need to know. Even if you're just thinking about it, it's good to have solid information about protecting your savings from inflation. So text JOBOB to 989898. I want to get to this clip. This is the president talking about Russia. Set up the story really quick, just briefly. I know we've talked about it consistently. Russia is essentially surrounding the northern side through Belarus and the eastern side that they border with Ukraine. Ukraine says they have about 125 to 150,000 troops on the ground surrounding the Ukrainian border. Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, is in Kiev. There's a lot of things going on. Vladimir Putin has been threatening to invade Ukraine and take it back into Russian territory. Obviously not going to move the land. They're going to take control of the land back into the control of the Russians. All of that being said, Joe Biden said this. There's been questions about what the United States would do if Russia were to actually attack. Joe Biden didn't make that any more clear with this statement.
So I think what you're going to see is that Russia will be held accountable if it invades. And it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, et cetera.
So that is the term floating around the internet nowadays, a minor incursion. What a lot of people don't know is what we're going to do if Russia does attack. But Joe Biden came outright and said, maybe it depends on what they do. If it's a minor incursion, here's the thing. There's no definition of what a minor incursion is. I stubbed my toe on the bed frame this morning, and some of you may think, well, that's just a minor incursion, but I issued a full-out assault on the bed because the bed clearly did that to me. What is a minor incursion? The problem is that we don't know definitively what Russia can do and what they can't do. Is it a minor incursion if they just have troops cross peacefully across the border? By peacefully, I mean with guns drawn and tanks at the ready. But we don't know what a minor incursion is in this regard that the president is talking about. I actually really liked what Jake Tapper had to say about this on CNN. Check this clip out. He's kind of analyzing what the president said about a minor incursion if Russia were to invade in Ukraine. Listen to this.
Well, I mean, they have a few things to clean up from the press conference. I mean, look, President Biden often says what's on his mind. Sometimes that can be seen as refreshing. Sometimes it can be seen as confusing, and sometimes perhaps it could be seen as dangerous. And in giving his assessment of the reality of the unanimity of NATO, which is that they're united on some things, but not, for instance, a quote-unquote minor incursion, he caused problems for the NATO coalition. He caused problems for Ukraine. You heard Matthew Chance's reporting out of Ukraine, out of Kiev, individuals worried that President Biden essentially gave a, quote, green light to Putin. That is certainly not what the White House wanted the president to convey. But as we know, Vladimir Putin watches American politics very sharply, very keenly, like a hawk. And I don't think that necessarily the president said anything that Putin didn't already know in terms of what he could get away with and what he cannot get away with. But I do think that perhaps it gives him further pretext to carry out an invasion, especially when you consider that it did sound to Ukrainian officials as though President Biden was distinguishing between a minor incursion and a major invasion, and in their view, giving a green light for the minor incursion.
So that is the problem. After Joe Biden's press conference, Jen Psaki in the White House press office issued an immediate retraction saying that, well, we don't know. We're going to come to Ukraine's defense in some way, shape, or form. There's a lot of angles to this that maybe we'll get into more of. But they issued a complete reversal of it depends on what it is. Now, Jake Tapper said something that I thought was actually pretty interesting, and I actually agree with. I don't think that Joe Biden said anything that Vladimir Putin didn't already know. So there's that. Vladimir Putin, again, watches U.S. politics very, very closely and acts accordingly. So we probably already knew that was what our plan of attack was going to be if Russia were to invade Ukraine. On the other hand, you can't say that sort of stuff because you can't let people know or give Vladimir Putin kind of an out or a green light, so to speak. That's what the message coming out of Kiev was, that the president gave Vladimir Putin a green light to commit a small incursion because we probably won't actually do anything. The other angle of that is I don't actually know what we should do. Maybe Germany, France, the UK, the people that are in the places where the Ukraine is in their backyard, maybe they should handle it. I've been saying this for weeks. I'm not entirely sure why this conversation is between the United States and Russia. It's Europe. Maybe Europe should handle what's going on in their own backyard. Again, a lot of variables to this story. I'm not entirely sure how it's going to play out. But again, if you watch the beginning of that clip, Joe Biden said, well, it depends on what they do. If it's a minor incursion, maybe we'll take some less action. Again, the White House walked that back almost immediately because it was seen as giving a green light to Vladimir Putin. Again, I think this is actually really important. We'll see how it plays out, but it doesn't look like it's going to be good, especially with all of those troops amassed on the Ukrainian border. We got to get to this. This is actually another part of the press conference that Joe Biden gave yesterday. They were talking about federal election laws, the big sweeping federal takeover of the election system failed in the Senate. We've got more details on that, plus Joe Biden's clip when he's asked a question about it. But before we get to that, I got to talk about this. Inflation is stealing your money. Inflation went up 7% last year. And unless you got a 7% raise, you got a 7% pay cut, because money is only the value at which you can buy things. And also, if you have savings accounts just sitting somewhere, not really doing much, you also lost 7% of your savings. So how are you going to protect your savings is the question that everybody should be asking. The answer that I have is invest in precious metals. I've been in precious metals for like 15 years. I know you might not believe that, but it's true. I was in precious metals in college. One of my best friends is so heavy into precious metals. I think his entire portfolio is precious metals. How do you get involved in precious metals? Well, guess what? It's not all that hard. It doesn't mean you back up a truck full of gold into your backyard. You can do that if you want, and our friends at Birch Gold will help you out doing that. But the best way to invest in precious metals and protect your savings is to convert your existing IRA, which you probably have, and an existing 401k into a gold-backed IRA. You can learn how to do that with a free, no-risk, no-obligation pamphlet being sent directly to you if you text JOBOB to 989898. That's it. That's all you need to do. There's no obligation. You're not buying anything. All you're doing is getting information on how to protect your savings, which is super important. Like you saw this press conference yesterday, Joe Biden doesn't think he did anything wrong in this first year in office, and he thinks he'd actually overperformed. So if this year was Joe Biden overperforming, who knows what the federal government is going to do to sabotage the U.S. dollars? Protect your savings with gold-backed IRAs and other gold products by texting JOBOB to 989898 with our friends at Birch Gold. Back to this. This is the federal election takeover. So yesterday, on top of the press conference that the president gave, the second only standalone press conference that he gave, the Senate voted on the election takeover. Let me get this straight. They voted on the rules to amend the rules. That rule change then failed, which then meant that Republicans were able to block by the cloture rule, the filibuster rule, the federal election takeover, if that makes sense. But before we kind of get into that and kind of going into the details of that, I want to play this clip from Joe Biden yesterday as he was talking about the federal election laws, casting doubt on the election system as a whole. Again, this is not a one-party issue. Joe Biden is also casting doubt. Hillary Clinton casted a lot of doubt in 2016. A third of Hillary Clinton voters said that this 2016 election wasn't actually legit. And Joe Biden is now doing it also. So watch this clip. Check it out.
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking of voting rights legislation, if this isn't passed, do you still believe the upcoming election will be fairly conducted and its results will be legitimate?
Well, it all depends on whether or not we're able to make the case to the American people that some of this is being set up to try to alter the outcome of the election. And it's one thing, look, maybe I'm just being too much of an optimist. Remember how we thought not that many people were going to show up to vote in the middle of a pandemic? We had the highest voter turnout in the history of the United States of America. Well, I think if, in fact, no matter how hard they make it for minorities to vote, I think you're going to see them willing to stand in line and defy the attempt to keep them from being able to vote.
Okay, so none of that was accurate. Nobody is trying to make it harder for minorities to vote. And if you think that, you probably also think that minorities, just de facto, you would have to think that minorities are too dumb to get a valid ID. That's why they're being discriminated against. In which case, that's discrimination in and of itself. That is what racism is, thinking minorities are so darn stupid that they can't get an ID to vote legally in the state in which they live. But all of that was standing. You heard the question. The question was, hey, Mr. President, if this bill doesn't pass, do you think there will be a good, solid election outcome next cycle? Joe Biden did not answer no. He didn't answer yes. He didn't emphatically say, well, I would believe the election results. He said, I don't know. We'll have to see. It's the exact same thing he claims that President Trump did, which he did, and also what Hillary Clinton did. Look, this is not a one-sided issue. I've been saying this constantly, and I'm going to say it up until the midterm election day. This is not a one-sided issue. Hillary Clinton questioned the election in 2016. Donald Trump questioned the election in 2020. And Joe Biden is already setting himself and his party up to question the election results in 2022 and also probably 2024 when they lose the House and the Senate. And that's not me saying, oh, I hope the Republicans take back the House. No, that's just looking at the lines and looking at all of the data and statistics and seeing who's up for office. Republicans 100% are going to take back the House and maybe even take back the Senate, although that's not entirely clear. That's not a partisan thing. That's just an objective analyst looking at the situation and going, oh, yeah, that's definitely going to happen. So when Republicans take back the House, Joe Biden is already setting himself and his party up to say, well, because we didn't pass federal takeover of elections, those elections aren't legit, which, again, is the only thing they've been saying about the Republican Party and the former president. They've been saying about them constantly. And again, this is not a one-party issue. So that's that. Let me see if there's anything we can get to outside of that. Oh, here we go. Just some of the details from the vote yesterday. An attempt by Democrats to change filibuster rules in order to pass a voting bill failed amid opposition from moderate Democrat Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. I never know which one it is. Kyrsten Sinema, senator from Arizona, the state that I'm in right now. The vote was 52-48, with two moderates joining the GOP senators. After the vote failed, there was a loud round of applause from Republicans. Look, also, Joe Manchin is in a pretty red state of West Virginia. Kyrsten Sinema is in a pretty red state of Arizona. Even though they have two Democratic senators, they are in a center-right. She's in a center-right state. I guarantee you there are more Democrat senators out there who don't want to have their name in this that are thanking Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema for doing what they did, because they believe that the filibuster is fundamental to the functionality of the U.S. Senate. If Joe Manchin weren't on this vote going the other way, and if Kyrsten Sinema wasn't on this vote going another way, I would guarantee you there's other Democrats out there that would have to step up at risk to their own seat and say, we can't do this. They are thankful that Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are able to vote for their ideas and stop this crazy abolishment of the filibuster rule. But again, that's just looking at it, trying to figure out there's no way that the majority of Democrat senators actually want the filibuster to go away, because they know, actually, Kyrsten Sinema released a statement Wednesday explaining why she opposed the change. The Arizona Democrat said she maintained her longstanding opposition to action that would deepen our division and risk, this is exactly what would happen, repeated radical reversals in federal policy. If you get rid of the filibuster and you only have a majority, the party in the majority will change all of the rules every single time it goes back. So when Republicans have the Senate and they have control of the Senate, which will happen eventually, they also should not get rid of the filibuster rule, because it's fundamental to keep the country in a more stabilized direction rather than swinging back and forth between radical policies. That is that. That's actually going to do it for us today. If you missed any part of the segment or missed any segment of the show, you can check it out anywhere you listen to podcasts, and also rewatch on Facebook and YouTube. Also on Twitter, I think we had some Twitter streaming problems earlier in the show. So wherever you watch, wherever you've taken anything, you can watch it there. If you haven't already, would love a follow on any of your social media platforms. Just type in JOBOB on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Getter, all of those, just Jobob. You'll find me. I get back to pretty much everything. So would love to have a conversation on those social media platforms if you would choose to do so. That's going to be it for us today. We'll see you same time, same place. Not the same place. We'll be back in the studios in Southern California doing the Daily Caller Live show. If you have some time, check out TPUSA Live. I'll be on the couch there, in about a couple hours or so, making jokes about the news because that's what I like to do. We'll see you tomorrow. God bless America.